Hey everyone, this is Brian Ferguson. I know if you're watching this that you're enjoying the Bumps and Thumps podcast. In order to continue the podcast and get the guests on that everyone wants to hear about, we need support from listeners like you. There are a few ways you can do this. One is going to anchor.fm, which will be on the bottom of your screen here, and click the support button. There you can make a monthly contribution to support the podcast. There's also, we have a Teespring store. We have a link down at the bottom of the screen as well for that. And we have products such as t-shirts like this one I'm wearing, backpacks, glassware, and other great items for you to purchase. Those purchases go directly back into the podcast and get on guests that require financial compensation. Thank you again for your support. Go to those websites and support our podcast, and we will continue to bring the guests that you want to hear about, past and present. And thank you for your support and enjoy the podcast. Thank you for joining another edition of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. I'm Brian Ferguson. My guest today is a photographer who photographed many pro wrestling matches and wrestlers in Minnesota during the 1990s. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Mark A. Peterson. Mark, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Brian, thank you so much for asking me. It's not very often someone asks a photographer to kind of show their pictures and tell their stories. So I really appreciate you asking me.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for reaching out. If full disclosure here, Mark and I have been kind of messaging back and forth for a little while, and thought it was interesting to have a photographer. You don't have that too often, and photographs are very important in the business. I mean, it truly is. I mean, it captures a wrestler's, his face, their body language, their expressions, and it's an underappreciated job. I will say that. So thank you, Mark, for reaching out and coming on. I really appreciate it. So
yeah, and thank you for saying that, because that's totally how I felt too. We were kind of working under the radar, and not many people saw us, and then it seemed like it was such there's so many hurdles to go through just to get like a picture published in a national magazine.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that. So I do appreciate you.
Oh, you bet. So let's talk a little bit before we get started on the pictures and all that. Let's talk a little bit about growing up. Where did you grow up, and your schooling and things like that? Give us a little background.
Okay, well, I grew up in a little neighborhood. It is kind of a suburb of St. Paul. It's called Lauderdale, and it's right next to Falcon Heights, which is fairly close to the Minnesota State Fairgrounds and the U of M St. Paul campus, just off of Highway 280 in Larpenteur. And I went to the Roseville area schools. And so it's really kind of like a small town in between two big cities, because 2 miles to the west is downtown Minneapolis and 7 miles to the east is downtown St. Paul. And then in addition to that, my dad's brother owned a little service station, and then an uncle owned a little convenience store, and then aunt and uncle lived down the street, and grandma lived 3 blocks away, and aunt and uncle lived around the corner. So it was really kind of a great way to be brought up,
Yeah. No, I totally understand. Let's talk about schooling. Did you go to some schooling for your photography, or how did you end up becoming a photographer?
Well, photography has kind of been one of those interests that I got really early on. I remember it was like a 7th grade industrial arts class where we had to take pictures and do develop the film. And I was really intrigued by that whole process. And then in 9th grade, I took photographics again. And then for an elective, I took it again in 10th grade, and then again took it in the 11th grade. And then my brother and I bought a camera, Pentax MV1. We had to kind of convince my mom and dad to let us use their credit card to buy this camera. And then I was off and run. It was one of those things where I didn't realize at the time, but I think in pictures, Yeah. And in very short order, my brother just went by the wayside. He can't even use a point and shoot, he got into cars, and I got into photography, and it was like every Christmas or holiday or birthday parties, someone would say, "Hi, Mark, it's good to see you. Did you bring your camera?" And another first love of mine was animals. So of course I was taking pictures of animals. And then another reoccurring theme in my life was the love of pro wrestling. It was always on at the house. But
Yeah.
again, my brother went his way. My mom just thought it was kind of this quirky thing Mark was involved in. My dad, just thought like the Crusher was humorous, but it wasn't their thing.
Yeah.
And then, so I just kind of got into photography. And then probably around the early 1990s, we had, there was a wrestling radio show. I think it was called Wrestle Radio.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposed to be Ray Webby Jr., who was a promoter, and then a couple other people. And so I listened to that every Sunday night, and they were talking about the matches that they had out in Ropers, which was known as George's at the time, in Fridley. And then I moved away for a couple of years and came back, and my mom got sick, and so I was kind of looking for things to do. So I'd attend those matches like religiously every month. And then at one point around February, March 90, I think maybe 91, I asked Ray Webby if there's anything I could do. And he says to me, "Can you take pictures?" And I said, "Yeah." And I don't know why he asked me that.
Yeah.
And he said, "Are you any good?" And I lied and said yes. And so I, rather than paying the $10 admission, I'd show up with my camera at George's in Fridley, which was just like a dive bar, and started taking like really awful photos. And then as the months went on, I would show the wrestlers, and then they would say, you're getting better. It's like, okay. And then around May of 91, I bought like a newer digital camera that was still film, but it had all the, the bells and whistles, so I could catch the images. And then someone says, you should send those in to Bill Apter,
Yeah.
who is a very well-known photographer and editor. And so I started sending pictures. I think I still have the first note he sent me back saying, "These are great, but we need them labeled on the back." So at the time, it was still film cameras. And so I would literally submit my film to Target for like 24-hour processing, get 2 set of prints, stamp everyone on the back, label them, ship them off, and in hopes that they would buy 5 or 6 prints.
Yeah.
And if they were nice, they would pay for 4 and buy 3. And then I would like never see them again until I had a couple of friends that worked at a magazine store that would let me know, "Hey, Mark, this month you have 2 photos in there."
Yeah.
A lot of times they weren't a lot of times they were not credited.
Yeah.
But I knew they were mine. And like the Holy Grail was to see a full page of like Tommy Ferrara, throwing someone, and I'll probably scroll through that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I got started, was Ray Webby Jr., who was a really nice guy, a great promoter. He did rock and wrestle for the homeless, and he was just one of those stand-up guys, which is few and far between in the wrestling business,
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got started.
That's really interesting. When I was a kid and I went to those matches and stuff, some of my friends, they'd make fun of me and all that. "Oh, it's fake," all that stuff. And it would, but there's such a diverse group of people that like wrestling, that people don't expect to like it. And for you, especially, photography, which you said you love animals, and I hate to say this because I get, when you look at somebody, you're like, how can that guy be a pro wrestling fan? If I didn't know what you did and I saw you, like you're a professor as well, I believe, right, at the college?
Yeah, I'm working on my doctorate of education leadership. I'm in the dissertation phase right now.
See, so I know you're really busy. I understand that. So,
well, the thing about it's kind of an anomaly because I shy away from anything violent. I certainly, I wouldn't watch a fight,
right.
But there was something about the action of pro wrestling, like baseball never held my interest, and Vikings never really held my interest. Soccer didn't, hockey, that's almost too much action for watching a puck. And so wrestling had characters, it had music, and I was kind of a teenager when the 1985, The Rock and
Rock and wrestling.
and action with Hulk Hogan and all
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So that just kind of sucked me in, and that was my thing. I'm not into superheroes or video games, and so wrestling kind of was my thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a little bit out of the ordinary, but normal enough. And I was a shy kid with like low self-esteem, low confidence. So hiding behind that camera was great. You know.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch the AWA. I mean, I'm originally from Wisconsin, Rice Lake, Wisconsin, a couple hours northeast of Minneapolis, there, St. Paul. And every Sunday morning, I would watch, Vern, Gagne, Bockwinkel, Patera, all those guys, Crusher. I have on my shirt here, and I just absolutely loved it. And my parents thought I was, loony. My dad would get all bent out of shape for me watching it, but I loved it, still do. And so let's talk about a little bit. You started out in this promotion in Minnesota, and you have a lot of pictures. What other promotions did you get in contact with, or did they contact you? And how did that all work for you?
Well, I basically just kept my ear to the grindstone. There was Wade Keller came up with his pro wrestling torch, and occasionally you would see upcoming, matches. And then Nick Karch had his Saturday Night at Ringside program, and so occasionally you would see or hear of events coming. And then Pro Wrestling America was Eddie Sharkey's promotion. That was about once a month, and then he would sometimes referee for other things. So I would just hear about it, but AWA was dead. I mean, they pretty much died. Their last ditch efforts was those two in May and June of 1990, their super cards. And then it was like about 9,000 people showed up, which was just puzzling to me because I was there for 6 years earlier when there was 19,000,
Yeah.
And so then about about 95, WCW did their Monday Night Nitro debut at the Mall of America. And so I got press credentials through Bill Apter's organization. And they gave me a Friday night of the Labor Day weekend. Hulk Hogan showed up at the Hard Rock Cafe, and then, Macho Man and a few other the big names did promotions. And then I got in with another photographer there to the Hard Rock. They gave us a free meal. I got my pictures, you see the picture of Hogan with his hands around my throat. And then the Monday Nitro debuted, but I still didn't get, they wouldn't let me in ringside, so I had to be behind the barriers.
Okay.
And then about a month later, they did a bass fishing tournament invitational at Lake Minnetonka, so I got pictures there. And then about a year later, they did a pay-per-view in Sturgis, South Dakota. That was a pretty neat card. They set the ring up in the middle of a field, and around the ring was like bikers on their bikes. And so that was like a 3-hour pay-per-view. And so those are kind of the only shows I did with WCW.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really like the organization hired me. I was more like a freelance. So I would just take the pictures and send them off to GC London Publishing Company, which owned the Bill Apter magazines at the time.
Okay.
And just hopes that they would publish them. And then a couple of years, about 2 or 3 years prior, a promoter by the name of Dennis Corluzzo got rights to the NWA name and started smaller shows, and Sean Waltman helped organize that. So I did some shows for them that got published, but it basically was just to show up, and if they let me in the building, take pictures. I remember showing up at one small card in Somerset, Wisconsin, where they said no pictures, no photos.
Yeah.
And I basically just called my editor and tell them why you're not allowing me. And it was just, some idiot helping out at the, at the card. And so I got pictures there, and it was kind of a hobby that didn't really pay for itself, but I broke even if I was lucky, because they didn't pay much per photo at the time. But it was one of those things. It was something I could do. It was my niche. I'm not very big. I think everyone involved in the wrestling business wants to be a wrestler someday, some way, somehow, but that just wasn't my reality. So this was something I could do. And then around 1997, I wanted to go back to school, and I got a master's in mass communications. And so there was another kid that showed up at the cards quite frequently. And I said, "Do you have a camera?" He said, "Yes." He got the same kind of camera I did. And then his name is Wayne McCarty. So you might want to visit with him, after we're finished, because he took over from me in the 90s and the 2000s.
Okay.
And he's, again, he started, but he's great now.
Yeah.
And he's since retired, which is kind of odd for me to say. Whoever took over from me is now retired, But I mean, the only thing I can say is I had a good run.
Yeah.
And I've been reminiscing about how good of a run by seeing some of these photos. So
yeah, it's really interesting.
I don't know if you want to get into.
Yeah, we can. I was going to ask you one more question. I know the WWE/F would not let outside photographers in at their shows for quite a few years. That's what Bill Apter told me that when I did a podcast with him a couple of years back. Were you ever able to get anything from a show after they lifted that thing, or did you ever do that for them?
No, I never shot anything for the WWE or WWF or, at a card. But the funny thing is that I like his former stars. Yeah. Once they, exited the WWE. So I got like Nails, and I got like Mike Enos and Barry Darsow, who was like 3 different characters. Yeah. And so they were always looking for work. And so I got them afterwards. And sometimes they would use the same gimmick, Yeah. So it was a much better thing, because you're right, they were really controlling, but they had really good photographers. There's just no way my equipment and my skills could do what they did, because I would see the magazines and their photo shoots, and they were like a well-oiled machine. So I didn't really feel slighted, but no, I just never really did anything for the WWF or WWE. Okay. And I was okay with that, actually. Yeah. So
you probably would have had a lot of constraints on you, I would assume. There's such
well, I know they kind of wanted you to wear black, and then like not use a flash and not be seen. Well, you can't really take pictures because you got to get in through the ropes, Mm-hmm. And I get it. They're doing their main TV, and so if you want me to not be seen, I don't know how I could do that, Yeah. Like at the Sturgis card, I was on a platform like, I don't know, 300 feet away, and my lens wasn't big enough. And so after kind of pitched a fit that I didn't get close enough, it's like, well, they didn't really allow me. So I jumped down, and as they're coming out to the entrance, I'd get my shots and then run back. So that wasn't ideal. Yeah. So the WWE would have been much more difficult. Yeah. But again, I was okay with not, working for the WWE.
Okay. So. All right. Well, let's get started with these pictures we have over here. Well, as you watching, you can see them. For you, those of you listening, sorry you're not going to be able to see them, but Mark can describe them for you.
I'll try to describe as much as possible.
Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. So are you able to see the one I got up now?
Yeah, Baron von Raschke's the first one.
So, I mean, he's just such a character, right? He was the one that I grew up watching as a kid. And so then the next thing you know, I mean, I'm there, and he's doing his goose step and his claw, and he's, every time he would see me, he would just do this pose. So he's basically doing a grimace in his red robe, And so the next shot is Sting, Steve Borden, with the face paint before he went to, like the dark Sting. And then Macho Man and Hulk Hogan. And then the guy on the right is Steve Mongo McMichael, who was a Chicago Bear football player. Now, I don't know why they tapped him to do play-by-play or color commentary, because he was awful. Yeah, he just would use the word baby, and it was just awful. Yeah. And so, but that's who they chose to do Monday Nitro. So, and this was at Planet Hollywood, the Monday of the Labor Day weekend. And then, of course, Ric Flair in the golden robe. And this is a split second of time where I got him in the woo, Yeah. And so when I'm taking these pictures, I am working, but in my head, I'm like a little 14-year-old girl, like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, Yeah. One of the most well-known, pro wrestlers in the world. Yeah. And then the next shot is Bobby the Brain Heenan and me and Gene Okerlund in Sturgis. And they had like a compound of like trailers and things. And when Bobby see me raise my camera, they weren't really talking or saying anything. So he knew, so he like posed for this photo. So that was kind of
That's pretty
how
cool. That's
nice
pretty,
he was. He didn't know
yeah.
me from Adam, you know.
Right.
And Gene was just a character, you know. In the Sturgis, we all showed up. I drove all night with my buddy. They had a storm the night of, and so it tore down the ring and the rigging and everything. So they had to rebuild everything. And Gene walks into this press conference and says, looks at all of us, we're all bedraggled, you know. And he says, what? There's no one own a razor in the whole town of Sturgis, you know, because everyone is like, you know, beards and stuff. So the whole, you know, he was just a character,
Yeah.
you know. So speaking of characters, the next one is Doink the Clown, and this is Matt Bourne or Matt Osborne, and he came to North Emery as a part of an NWA show.
Okay.
Again, this is one of those WWE guys that is past his prime. They had run the Doink, you know, storyline or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was basically looking for, you know, to kind of recapture what he had.
Yeah.
And the strange thing was he climbed underneath the ring and got his eye gashed by one of the spikes hanging down. So he was like really upset the whole match.
Ouch.
So I don't know if, okay, so we didn't talk about this, but the next one is Terry Funk. And I don't know if you're able to show that video clip or not of me almost getting killed by Terry Funk.
I saw it. I watched it. Yeah, I don't have it available. I wish I did, but that was totally like out of the blue. And yeah, that was, I mean, you didn't even do anything really, did you? If I remember right, you just were there. Wrong place, wrong time.
I just took his picture and he was you know, he's coming at me and I took his picture. Deshaun Waltman after the matches, he said, Mark, you know, you were really lucky because he did hurt like Jimmy Suzuki, who was a Japanese photographer. I'm like, well, I didn't do anything. But apparently, you know, he comes in normal as Terry Funk, and then he kind of goes into this cycle where he's got to become this madman. And so he kind of just gets caught up in it. And I don't know if that's a protective mechanism or what happened. So yeah, I was lucky. But at one point, he is going after Hawk at the American Indian Center. They're up in the stands and on the bleachers. And it was so crazy that I jumped up onto the ringside and Eddie Sharkey, the referee, was inside the ring. And I fully expected Eddie Sharkey to say, hey, get down. But I said, listen, I think it's safer up here. He looked at me and said, these guys are nuts. You know, now when Eddie Sharkey calls someone nuts, you know,
Yeah.
you know, things are out of control. So, but I gotta say, like 6 or 8 of my photos from that match made, you know, like a full like 3-4 page spread in the After magazine, so it was well worth it, you know.
Oh, I'm sure
So
it
that
did.
was kind of,
yeah.
I knew I made the big time when Terry Funk tried to kill me, you know. So next photo is, you know him as the Big Show, but he was known as the Giant at the time in WCW with Jimmy Hart. That was in Sturgis. They were just coming to the ring. Now this next photo, this is what I would call a classic magazine shot, because you're looking through the ropes. And so you have one of the wrestlers that's on top putting a hold on, and that's Nails.
Yeah.
Kevin Wachtholz. He's like twisting the neck of Road Warrior Hawk. And then you've got Eddie Sharkey in there checking, you know, if he's going to give up or asking a question. So it's like, it's perfectly framed.
Yeah.
It tells a story. That's kind of what, you know, I was after almost each time. But of course, it's all kind of catch as catch can. And again, Superfly Jimmy Snuka, one of the WWF legends, is like in Hamline University in St. Paul. So it's like, I can't believe what I'm seeing, you know. But again, I got a job to do, so I just capture the best I can.
Yeah.
Next one is the NWO when they started that. Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, Ed Leslie, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, Kevin Nash, and they just killed the Giant. So the Giant's flat on his back, you know. And I got to tell you, that night I was so tired. I had, you know, not enough water, not enough food, not enough sleep. But God, that was one of the best times of my life, you know.
Yeah.
Next photo of Marcus Bagwell and Nick Patrick at the Mall of America.
Okay.
Hugh Morris.
Morris.
Bill Dermott, and he went on to be one of the trainers at one of the camps down in Georgia. And I don't know if he's still active or not, but
I know he used to do the Performance Center for WWE in Florida. I don't know if he still does. I know as about 2 years ago, he was one of the head guys, and I don't know if he still does it or not, though. But yeah.
So he saw me and he kind of posed for me. So I just really appreciate. And again, like this one, Jimmy Hart and Brian Pillman, they saw me. They were signing autographs. At one point, my flash didn't go off. They said, your flash didn't go off. They kept signing autographs. And then when I was ready, so it's like, I mean, that's all I needed. And but so many guys didn't do that. So, I thank them profusely. And then another thing about taking these photos and seeing these photos again, as I'm going through these, is like, this guy's dead. This guy's dead. This guy's dead. And so it's just, and sad. This guy, it's really sad. And I just saw him like 2 weeks ago at a card in Stillwater, Minnesota, and he's like Lex Luger, Larry Full. He's like in a wheelchair. He's paralyzed. His hands are like crippled, and he's signing autographs to make money. It's like, to go from this photo to how he is now, it's just really.
I saw him at WrestleCon in Dallas, and he didn't look very good. I'll just say that. I don't want to degrade the man, but he didn't look very good, and it's unfortunate. So, the Sheik.
No, I got to tell you a story. So every time I take a picture of the Sheik, it says, Sheik, I need you to do your eyes, and this is what he would do. He was perfect. And so a little bit later down, we'll see some shots of he brought like a dancing girl, and so he wanted photos, so he came to my house. And so he's in the driveway, sitting in a lawn chair, putting on suntan lotion. And I'm thinking to myself, 10 years earlier than this, and I wanted Greg Gagne and Vern Gagne to kill him in the middle of the ring.
Yeah.
And now he's at my house telling stories from Cleveland or something,
Yeah.
And so just a character, And so the next shot is one of my favorite shots too, because it really captures kind of a split-second moment in time.
Yeah.
Where this is the Lightning, and he's doing like a running sidekick. And if you look closely, it almost looks like he kicked Billy Blaze's head off because it's bent backwards so far.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember this happening. Is one of those things where I got the print back and I'm like, oh, so it's like I had to enlarge that,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And so, of course, Lightning Kid goes on to become, X-Pac and 1, 2, 3 Kid and,
Six.
a couple other things. Yeah. And so this is how it, got started. This is another great shot where Mick Karch was interviewing Sir Oliver Humperdinck and Sabu. They just came in for that day, the NWA card in American Indian Center. Now look at Mick Karch's face if you can. He's really pissed off because Sabu is the wild man, right?
Yeah.
And he grabs Mick Karch by lapel, shakes him, and Mick's glasses go flying off into the crowd, which he was upset about, which I guess I would be too.
Yeah.
But what he found out later was Sabu says, take your glasses. So he was kind of mad at him, but it turned out it was okay if he just hurt him, so this is one of those, so kind of behind the scenes. Sheik Adnan LTC with Barry Darso, and Barry was Blacktop Bully and the Repo Man and one half of Smash, and I think Crusher Khrushchev. And he's one of those guys that had longevity in the business. I don't know what he's doing now. He's probably selling trucks or something, but one of those just nice guys that was able to survive, by changing, gimmicks or whatever.
Yep.
This was interesting. This is Chris Candido.
Yes.
He's now since passed.
Yeah.
He came to town and fought Brian Christopher, who was Jerry Lawler's son.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting to see two heels come to town and what the crowd would do with that, Yeah. So that was kind of that was at Brooklyn Park, an NWA show.
Okay.
These two guys here were kind of like underrated and probably the best heel team in the Twin Cities for the PWA. Jamie Mangan on the left, who went by The Hater, and then JR, who his name is JR Bonus, and he went by JR Carson, the Punisher. And they they could have done anything, but they just didn't go very far for whatever reason.
Okay. That guy on the left looks familiar, but yeah, I might have seen him somewhere at a card or something. He looks familiar.
Yeah, he just never made it big, and I don't really know why. This is Dennis Corluzzo. He was a lawyer by trade, but he wanted to resurrect the NWA and did his best. It was kind of a last ditch effort, but he ran a few shows in Minnesota. And then, of course, Jerry Lynn on the right and Road Warrior Hawk. Again,
young Jerry Lynn there.
Yeah, he went through various stages, but his personality was not really dynamic, even though he went by Dynamic Jerry Lynn. He didn't like to do interviews. He just wanted to wrestle, So the next one is Horace, the Psychopath, John. And this is kind of funny. He showed up at my house one time to take photos. He showed up, brought his gear, painted his face. We took the photos and they said, well, there's a shower in there if you want it. He said, no, I'm fine. I said, you're going to drive home with that face paint on? He says, yeah, I do it from, wrestling cars all the time. I said, well, have you ever gotten stopped, by a police officer? He said, no. So he was one of those guys that was a little odd, and I can't really put my finger on why he was odd, but he just was. But he had a great gimmick at the time,
Yeah.
So again, that's next one's a young Jerry Lynn. I'll just go
Yeah.
Okay, so in my head, this is a big deal, right? Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Is posing for me with Eric Bischoff and Mongo McMichael with the belt. And so this guy on the right is like the ultimate idol. He was no one in the 80s was as big and as golden and as muscular. So this was kind of my teenage childhood growing up, and then now he's like 6 feet away. So this was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
This is the Punisher in St. Anthony, Minnesota, with the Baron. So again, this is a good magazine shot. It's good lighting. You can tell something's going on. You're looking inside, the ring. Road Warrior Animal. Road Warrior Hawk. I would bring a mirror with me when I would do a photo shoot and ask him, is your makeup okay? And he really appreciated that, because of attention to detail. This is Sabu versus, I think it's Jerry Lynn's leg. Sabu was just a wild card, he would just do weird stuff. And so here's the one where she came to my house and he brought his dancing girl. So, how do I explain this to my father other than, I'm doing a wrestling shoot?
Yeah.
And so they did various poses in my backyard, and I had this background. And again, I wanted to, Vern Gagne to kill this guy 10 years earlier. So it's just pretty funny, how.
Yeah.
Another one of the Punisher. I'll click through a few of these here.
Okay.
This is the Wild Alaskan, Rick Renslow.
Okay.
This is another good shot of Road Warrior Hawk versus Eddie Gilbert.
Okay.
And this was in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, where it was an NWA show, and I showed up. And the first thing that the promoter says to me says, do you have any medical training? And I said, well, yeah, I work security. And he says, well, there's a medical emergency. I'm like, okay, who? And he says, Brian Christopher. And I'm like, what? And he's like, Brian Christopher's not feeling well, he's got diarrhea. Okay, well, that's not a medical emergency. So me being the nice guy, I go to like a local convenience store and I get some Imodium. And then, while I'm there, could you pick up some razor blades for Ebert? So the stuff you're seeing on Eddie's face is because of me, because I bought him razor blades. So that was,
gotta do what you gotta do, I guess, right?
Well, to me, that was like an acceptance, right?
Right. Yeah.
It was still kind of in the days of kayfabe, where if anyone walked in the locker room, you'd kind of dummy up, So the fact that they didn't know me, but the fact that they trusted me, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Right.
This is a really good shot of the Lightning Kid on top, and Tommy Ferrara, who was like a local guy. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was like in his 40s when he was wrestling for PWA. An interesting thing about him was that he was like 5'11" when he started and like 5'9" when he finished wrestling.
Gosh.
all the slams literally shrunk him,
Yeah.
And he would take a beating each and every match. but he would just come back and he would still sign autographs even after he was like heading off to the hospital, So
Gosh, that's what.
just one of those good workers.
Yeah.
One is Tony DiNucci, whose real name is Todd Perry. And he actually worked for the AWA towards the end there. He worked on those 2 cards in 1990.
Okay.
He wanted publicity shots. I brought him to a local golf course, and he rode his bike there. And I'm like, Tony, I need you up on the bike. And he refused me 3 times. So he took off his shirt. I said, just trust me. So what ended up happening was he made 100 copies of this shot and other shots. He went to local cards in northern Minnesota on a weekend. He sold 100 of these shots to fans on a Friday night. Went to a local Kinko's, got another 100 made, sold all them on a Saturday. Went to another and sold 300 on a Sunday. So he made like $300 by this shot that he didn't want to do.
Well, there you go. I didn't trust you.
Yeah, and then he was worse than a little girl. He didn't like how his face looked in this shot, at the lake, and so pleasing some of these guys,
Yeah.
I'll click through. That's Baron and Sheik. This is Brad Rangens. Brad Rangens was he was the trainer of some of the guys. I was able to go to his camp, and where he was training Jesse Hedig, who was Kurt's brother.
Okay.
And just one of those well-respected guys who this was his business. He was a trainer. That's what he did. Occasionally he would get into the ring, maybe help out with one of his, trainees, but he was just a good, solid guy, and didn't really get his due that he should have. So
yeah, I agree.
This is the hater who had got his nose bloodied by Charlie Norris. And that's Charlie Norris. Charlie was he had an audition for WWE, and he was working out with Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard, and they're on the ellipticals and the treadmill, and they said, hey Charlie, we like everything about you. We like the headdress. We like your native, but we're not crazy about your physique. And so Charlie said they stopped short of telling me to go on the steroids. And then within a matter of a couple of months, Chris Chavez, who got the role of I think they call him something like Tatanka or something.
Tatanka, yeah.
So that was Charlie Norris's shot. So he just made it in the WCW for a little bit and then faded off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Again, this is Lex Luger and the Lex for America tour. Steve Berg, he was like 6'11", and Jamie Mangan, he never made it big either.
Yeah.
This next picture is a shot of one of the midget wrestlers. They didn't come here very often, but some of the local shows would use them. This is Chris, and he's from Missouri. Okay. And he would take on Little Tokyo. Little Tokyo was the booker for the politically correct term now, or what you call them, or if there's even still, midget if wrestling. There's still wrestling. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know either, to be honest. Yeah, Little Tokyo.
So Charlie Norris, a couple of announcers, Mick Cart and George Shire.
Yeah. No.
So this is Mike Enos. He was Blake Beverly, and then the Destruction Crew in the AWA. Yeah. And again, he made it big, but would come towards local shows afterwards. This next guy, Ricky Rice, he never really made it big either, but he was a good mainstay in the AWA. He was just a funny character. He called himself the Prophet, and he had a good fan following, a good wrestler. Yeah. This next one is Stan Kowalski with Billy Blaze. Okay. This is one of my favorite shots, looking through like a turnbuckle at the Monday Nitro debut with Bobby Heenan. And I didn't really bug him because it's like coming, but this is one of my favorite shots too.
Yeah, that's a good shot.
Jimmy Brunzell with Chris Markoff. Again, this is a good magazine shot. You can see what's going on. Yeah. Colonel Robert Fuller. He was managing a couple of Country Boy tag team with Dick Slater and Bunkhouse Buck, I think. Didn't last long. Okay, so I got to tell a story about this one. Okay. Road Warrior Hawk is at Champs in Maplewood, and this is a local stand-up comedian called Fancy Ray McCloney.
Okay.
And Fancy Ray's shtick was he's the best looking man in comedy, right? And so it's kind of a cross between like Little Richard and James Brown.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing about this was Hawk didn't know what to make of this guy, And so I went up to Hawk and he says, like, what's this guy's deal? I'm like, well, he's a stand-up comedian locally. He's got his own public access cable TV show, which is what he's interviewing you for.
Mm-hmm.
His deal is he's the best looking man in comedy. And yes, he was wearing makeup, which was kind of funny to me because Hawk was wearing makeup and wearing spikes and he didn't know how to figure this guy out, right? So, and then I held out my mirror to Hawk. I says, is your makeup okay? He says, yeah, thanks, I appreciate that. So then he was able to do the interview,
Yeah.
So that was kind of a
cool.
weird thing.
Yeah.
So this is Ken Patera after his heyday. He was sometimes a promoter, but it's unusual for me to get him smiling. He just kind of complained about everything. So this is a really cool shot of Lee Marshall. He was an announcer for the AWA for a while, and they just hired him at WCW to kind of warm up the crowd. And as part of my Facebook, you can see the thank you note he sent me for just sending him this photo. So he said he loved working for Vern. He had a good experience.
Yeah.
And I thought he had a great, I think he had a great voice. Mm-hmm. So next shot is Mr. On top of Jerry Lynn and doing some sort of like a nerve technique. Again, this is a really good magazine shot. You see the referee's hand in there checking, showing pain and action. It's perfectly lit, perfectly framed. So sometimes it's almost kind of a miracle when that happens, Norman the Lunatic, he didn't last very long. He had a couple other gimmicks. He came to Minnesota for just one show. Okay. T.Joe Khan, Tom Cassatt, his real name was Tom Cassatt. Grew up in St. Paul, but of course his gimmick was an Asian wild man, with he had like a ponytail one time that was braided at the time.
Yeah.
And so again, one of the nicest guys that supposedly was a savage, So this is a great bloodshot of Tommy Ferrara. He had his cheek split open, I think, by the Lightning Kid. And again, he would get injured every time and just come back for more. One of the toughest guys, ever.
Yeah.
So this is Wellington Wilkins. He went on to work for a couple of Japan promotions. As far as I know, he's still there. Kind of a smaller guy, about 5'6", 5'7". Let's see. This is Horace the Psychopath. Everyone's favorite.
Kenny J.
Kenny J.
Yes.
He had a fan following. Basically, his career was getting beaten up too. Yeah.
So. Yeah. I met him last year at Crusher Fest. Nice guy.
Next shot is at the Mall of America. Ric Flair doing a standoff with Sting. Mm-hmm. Again, this isn't a in the ring magazine shot, but it's a good magazine shot because you can tell that there's a story going on here.
Right. Yeah.
Eddie Sharkey, referee, manager, promoter, the closest thing we got to a mafia don in the Twin Cities. His motto was "Get the money, dash." So another good referee, Bruce Kreitzman. He was a photographer prior to doing the refereeing, and I'm not sure what he's doing now.
Okay.
This is one of my favorite shots of Charlie out at the golf course. Everything was just working that day,
Yeah.
A lot of the time the guys that were younger didn't know how to pose or what to do, so that was always kind of a challenge,
Yeah.
Another referee, this guy here, Larry Cameron, again, was one that never really made it big. He unfortunately died in the ring in Germany.
Oh gosh.
Of a pulmonary or heart issues. Oh. And he was like 42.
Oh wow.
And he was kind of got his start here in the Twin Cities too.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of one of those tragedies that just follows wrestling. Next one is Lenny Lane. He was a good preliminary guy, worked for WCW, and I'm trying to remember what his gimmick was. It wasn't, it didn't catch on, but he did okay for a little while.
Yeah.
So this is the shot of the Sheik and his dancing girl Lily in my backyard, you know. And I think this is a perfect shot, perfect color,
very good
perfectly
shot. Yeah.
framed.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. Sheik never paid me for any of those photos. So, you know, I
Yeah.
got, you know,
I
I'm
got
just going to scroll through.
Yeah.
This one here is the envelope my credentials came in for the Mall of America. So to me, this is a big time where World Championship Wrestling is sending me something, you know.
There you go. That's right.
This is the Sheik with that and that's Ray Webby Jr. He's the guy that he was like a sports journalist in Minneapolis, and he had Wrestle Radio, and he would do a wrestling column, and then he kind of helped promote with Eddie.
Okay.
The thing about Eddie was he kind of let through the work. So like Ray would get the stuff printed up and the tickets, and then give the tickets to the guys to sell. Well, of course, the wrestlers would give them all to their friends and family and coworkers, and so the place would be packed, but only like half had paid, you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
no, this was Ray Webby, who also worked for Catholic Charities, and he put on Rock and Wrestle for the Homeless and Wrestle for Shelter.
Oh.
And just one of those great guys. And unfortunately, he got like hepatitis C and a couple other things, and just exited this world way too soon. But
yeah.
I wouldn't have done photography if it wasn't for, you know, for this guy, for Ray Webby. So in Minnesota, we didn't have many pro wrestling women, but Sandy Partlow came from the Kansas City territory, and so she lived here for a little while. So she would work local promotions as much as she could. She had a regular job at, you know, Red Lobster or something.
Yeah.
And she trained her daughter to wrestle too. And there wasn't that many women that would, you know, so.
Yeah.
And this is Terry Power. She came to town for this one show.
Okay.
She went on to the WWF. I forget her ring name. I think it was Terry something.
Yeah.
This next shot is a really cool shot. If you look closely, this is the Volcano Kid, and he's twirling fire like a Polynesian act. And if you notice, look at his foot. There's fire flames on his foot. There are, yes. And he did one of those like Polynesian luau things at the Disneyland in California. And believe it or not, he's one of the famous family that was like, Rodney was his cousin who went on to be Yokozuna. So he's one of the wrestling famous families, the Polynesian, you know, the Tongans. Yep. But he never made it big, but he just kind of wanted to try it. And then he went back to California, and I don't know if he's still working for Disney or what he's doing, but he was really nice. Yeah, that's cool. Got some, you know, some photos that he needed. This was Savannah Jack. He was a UWF heavyweight champion for a while. Okay. He got a really good push when a lot of African Americans weren't getting a push. Yeah. And so this was, you know, after his heyday, and he'd since retired, and he went on to have, you know, some heart issues and end up dying of heart failure too, just a few years ago. So he came to a local show, and I took his picture, and I'm glad I did. Yeah. Next one is a Mr. JL. This is Jerry Lynn under hood, so he could make some extra money. He would literally wrestle on the same WCW program as Jerry Lynn, and then come out a few minutes later as Mr. JL. It's like, oh, I wonder who that is. You know? Yeah. So you were talking about WWF, and this was Nails, Kevin Wacholtz. He was Nails, the convict, and then he kind of tried to use the gimmick afterwards, and then Vince kind of gave him a, you know, cease and desist letter. But he went on to work a few extra years afterwards. But the rumor was that one show in Madison, he tried choking Vince McMahon. Yes, I've heard that. I wasn't there, you know, so, but he was nice to me. That was always kind of, you know, concern if these guys were just slightly off center, if they're going to do anything to me, but I never really had a problem. Just Terry Funk. Just Terry Funk. I did get body slammed, but I'll tell you about that later. Okay. So this is Derek Dukes. He was in the AWA for a while with Scotty Zappa, just those two guys that were in the local scene that just worked their butts off. But Derek was with AWA for a while. I don't know about Scott. They just kind of never made it big. So this next shot is a very unique shot. It made a full page color in one of the magazines. Oh, wow. It's Terry Power and she's teaming with Tommy Ferrara against Jerry Lynn and Sandy Partlow. So this was a mixed tag team. This did not happen, to my knowledge, ever before. And so Terry Power was so powerful, she launched Tommy Ferrara onto Jerry Lynn,
Oh,
I
wow.
think, for the pin. And so again, perfect in-ring shot. You got color in the background. You got great lighting, perfectly framed, unique situation. It made full page color. So,
Awesome. Yeah.
you know, I
pretty
can't
neat.
can't ask for anything better than that, you know.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. Do you know this guy?
He looks familiar. Can't.
Okay, well, he was a local guy. He went by JB Trask, and he supposedly said that he is Kenny Sodbuster Jay's nephew. So they had a big feud because they had a family falling out, right?
Okay.
But this is one of those guys that thought that he was better than he was. He thought he could be the next Hulk Hogan.
Oh.
And he just isn't. He just isn't.
Yeah.
You know? So he sometimes would tag with this guy. This is Dave Siegfried, who again never made it big. He went by the name of Mr. Dynamic.
Okay.
He's from Superior, Wisconsin. Never made it big, which was too bad. I thought he was a good worker. He knew his stuff.
Yeah.
So this is another shot from that mixed tag team of Tommy Ferrara, Jerry Lynn, and Terry Power on top. So again, a very unique shot inside the ring.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty neat. Wow.
Randy Gusto, the judge, he was from North Dakota, against Jeff Warner. Now, Jeff was like 6'11" and just huge. He was a part of a tag team called Maximum Overdrive.
Okay.
And they wanted to go to Japan. One of the partners, Tim Hunt, said, no, I want to go up to Calgary. Jeff said, no, I want to go to Japan. And Tim's like, well, I don't think we're ready for Japan. So they basically split up and never made it big either because they split up. Now, my understanding, Warner went on to like train Ultimate Fighters or MMA people.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The interesting story about Jeff Warner, and I'm talking about the guy on the bottom of this picture here.
Okay.
Again, he was 6'11", huge. Well, whenever he would wrestle at Northeast Minneapolis at George's, his mom would be in the crowd, and whoever was beating up her son, she would get into the ring and take her shoe off and try to attack. And, her husband would tell her this isn't real. And Jeff would say, Mom, you can't do that. And the security at the event was aware, and Eddie Sharkey was aware. But I tell you, every time Mrs. Warner would have to protect her baby boy. So this was a picture of the hater. We drove to a local alley in downtown Minneapolis. He found some bottles. He found a spray can. He painted hate. At one point, I've got a picture of him flipping me the finger, which is like the best. This is one of those photo shoots that basically came out of nowhere and created itself. So
yeah, that's pretty neat.
So here's Jeff Warner throwing the referee. This guy here, he never made it big. Red Tyler, he was in the AWA as like a squash match guy.
Yes.
He could wrestle. He just didn't really have a great personality. I think he was like by trade an accountant or something.
Okay.
And he was really nice. He would tell me what his finishing maneuvers are so I could get the pictures. He just never made it big, and I kind of feel real bad for him about that, Yeah. But he did work in the AWA for a while. So
all right.
There's Derek Duke.
Yep.
Derek Dukes. He did one half with Ricky Rice. Yeah, I don't. Do you remember what their tag
Top
team
Guns
name? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
This is a pretty good shot too. This is Steve Berg. I think he was like 6'11". He's basically just flattening Billy Blaze.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of loved about this was I could capture action, split seconds, you know. Like this is Frank Anderson. He was a Swedish wrestling champion. He came to Minnesota to get trained by Brad Rangens and then worked with Eddie. And then this is Tony DiNucci with a backflip. So you can notice Tony's body is just like contorted on the way down.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of love. That's what I kind of loved about doing this. I could capture, split second. This guy never made it big either. I'm surprised he didn't get sued for copyright infringement. He went by the Jokester. This is when some of the Batman movies were coming out.
Yeah.
Again, a nice kid, just never made it big, and I
Yeah.
kind of knew he wouldn't. His just heart wasn't in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This guy was Warren Bianchi. He went by the Party Animal. Good solid worker, never made it big either.
Yeah.
This was the shot in the Northeast Armory, Minneapolis, where Hawk was facing Doink the Clown. And if you notice on the Doink's right eyebrow,
Yes,
it's blood. He crawled underneath the ring. His gimmick was like a creepy clown.
Yeah.
And so he climbed underneath the ring. There was a big spike hanging down, and he gashed his eye for real. And he was just so mad at the whole match. And then when the match was over, I followed him to the restroom, and he's like, "What do you want?" I'm like, I need a blood shot. And he's like, "Well, then take it." And so I got, a shot of him with a blood shot, because that's like gold,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't know. I don't think he ever came back. And I think he was one of those that sustained, chronic traumatic brain injury.
Okay.
And I think his widow is like one of those that's suing the WWE for that. So that kind of explains a lot,
Yeah.
So this is a good in-ring shot. Johnny Love, he owned a gym in Northeast Minneapolis. A lot of the guys trained there.
Okay.
He never really made it big either, but he was one of those guys that everyone respected.
Yeah.
And he's wrestling Jerry Lynn, and he could really wrestle too,
Yeah.
This is Louis Spicolli. He started off in ECW, and then he made it big a while. Again, one of those tragic stories where he passed away very young because he was addicted to painkillers.
Oh yeah.
But he was real nice with me.
Yeah.
Of course, one of the most recognized manager, Mouth of the South.
Yep.
This is a great shot too. This is Barry Darsow as the Repo Man. And then he's facing Chad, who went by the Chosen One. And unfortunately, Chad had like a car accident and hurt his back, so he just faded off into the sunset. But he kind of wanted to preach goodness, and he was religious, and so he's kind of wanted to bring that to the wrestling scene, which was a good notion at the time, but it just never went very far. So this is Lord Littlebrook. For a while there, he was the booker of the midget wrestlers. So he would come and face Little Tokyo, or the Karate Kid, or a few other guys.
Yeah.
This is another guy, Beef Burton, Tom Burton, and he was a good solid worker. Unfortunately, he was on the steroids too, and he passed away very suddenly at a young age too. So
yeah, that's too bad. Nick Bockwinkel.
Nick Bockwinkel and Mick Karch.
Yeah.
Those two guys just were the best of friends, and what can you say?
Yeah.
This is a great wrestling gimmick that didn't go as far as it should have. This is the Tasmaniac.
Okay.
And that's Taz. You hear him doing color commentary.
That's him.
And I thought that's him. And I thought this was like the best thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
You don't know what this is. Is this an animal? Is this
Yeah.
And he told the manager, that he just basically like plays a crazy wild man,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think he wrestled Brad Ringens at this show. It was in the Indian Center in Minneapolis, and they just basically put on a good wrestling match.
Yeah.
So this is Kurt Hennig at a autograph signing session. I think this is when his back was injured, so he's basically doing stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Macho Man, I kept my distance. He was bleary-eyed, and I just got my shots and got out of there. That was at the Hard Rock Cafe.
Okay.
One of those things you don't see very often. They did a invitational bass tournament. So this is Road Warrior Animal on a boat after he's coming in.
Okay.
This is, I got to show you this. If you look up upper right, it says Bill Apter, photographer.
Yes.
Mark, good stuff, but I need ID on most. Please ID and resubmit. Thanks.
Yeah.
And then yes, a regular flow of photos is okay. So on the letterhead from Bill Apter.
Yeah.
So I kept that. So.
Nice guy, Bill Apter. Like I said, did a podcast. Heck of a nice guy.
This was Charlie Norris on the left with a little fan. His name is Kevin.
Okay.
And I'm sure, Kevin had some sort of physical disability, and they were always very nice to him. And this is on the right. It's he goes by the name of Sam Houston, but his real name is Michael Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the half brother to Jake the Snake Roberts and son of Grizzly Smith.
Right. Yeah.
And so they did kind of a cowboy and Indian tag team for a while.
Gotcha. Okay.
This was a Nasty Boys out in Sturgis with Gene being interviewed in the middle of the ring.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite shots too. Again, you normally want to look through the rings, but this kind of tells another story. This is Brian Pillman being placed in one of those excruciating holds by Jushin Thunder Liger.
Yes.
And then this is at the Mall of America with Nick Patrick, asking him if he wants to submit. This is just a standard shot of Horace Psycho and Dan Jesser and Eddie Sharkey.
Okay. Yeah.
Tommy Jammer was a preliminary guy for AWA. Yep. He kind of did like a surfer gimmick and maybe skateboarding guy gimmick. He never kind of made it big. Again, I think he was like an accountant or lawyer or something and went on to a normal life. Wild Bill Irwin, he'd always bring that crazy bull rope, and snap that thing, which was kind of scary.
Yeah.
This was past his AWA prime too, so he just would show up at local shows, kind of do the same thing. This is Brian Christopher, the guy that I saved from a medical emergency.
Right.
That was Jerry Lawler's son, and I think he's passed away now.
Yeah, he died. I think last year or the year before. Yeah, he passed away, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. So he did a match with Chris Candido, and it was kind of interesting to see who the crowd would pick as the favorite. So
yeah, and
that was kind of a unique. This is the Hater giving Tommy Ferrara a drink behind the bar at one of the local bars. They would just take it all over the place. Yeah. This is one of my favorite shots. Rick Renslow came to my house, and we trudged out to my backyard and took some shots in their time too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he went on to also do a gimmick called Big Trucker Daddy and whatever. So he knew the story. He knew how to pose. He knew what to do. One of the shots I got back and I can see is like wedding ring. It's like, well, I should have spotted that. A wild Alaskan wouldn't, be married. So. So this is Saturday Night at Ringside. I don't know if you've talked about Mick's TV show he had on for about 4 years.
Okay.
And basically he did interviews between wrestling shows. So it was like an NWA show. It was either like a global or USWA or World Class Championship show. He would do like fan of the week or wrestling news or where are they now, or talk about local promotions, and then he would have on guests. So this was the Golden Idol, who was a manager, and just a great gimmick. You just love to hate him, and so Mick would always just play it up. And this is Mick Karch with his favorite Waller Ball, AWA Day, promoter.
Yes.
And so it was kind of a favorite. And this is a great shot too, because this is Sean Waltman, who went on to become 1-2-3 Kid, Lightning Kid, X-Pac, and so this is him giving Mick Karch a hug. This is JB Trask with Dave Siegfrieds after a match. This is I think he went by the name of Playboy Buddy Wolf.
Buddy Wolf, really
know him.
Yeah.
So he was just on the anniversary show with Mick.
Okay.
This is one of the guys that you should know. This is Ray Stevens.
I was gonna say, is that the Crippler? Yeah.
It's the Crippler. This was obviously way past his prime. I think he suffered from COPD or emphysema or something, so he was in pretty rough shape. But
yeah,
of course, when you're at a wrestling card, you got to get in and act like you can still do it. So this is Tommy Ferrara holding him back. This is a great shot. I love. This is Kurt Hennig, little brother Jesse Hennig, who just got out of the service and didn't know what to do with his life and thought, well, he'll train with Brad Ringens, and then this is Larry the Axe.
Yeah.
So these shots were at Rockford, Minnesota, small local bar. I had heard somewhere that this was going to happen, so I showed up and of course got my shots. And then of course Mama was there. And so I took a handkerchief out of my pocket and I said, Mom, pretend like you're wiping his face, and Jesse, pretend like you hate it like a little kid.
Yeah.
And so the whole family.
Yeah. That's awesome.
This next shot it's a very interesting shot. This is Jimbo Star. He was a local guy, And what's interesting about him is that he's completely deaf. He
Oh.
can't hear. And so when he was in the ring, it was difficult to communicate with him. And he could have made it bigger than he did, but he just never went very far. He never really worked out, you know.
Hmm.
But I thought, you know, that way to kind of advance, you know,
Yeah.
people with disabilities. And so I got to speak. He was just like overweight and out of shape, and he could have done better than he did. But
Yeah.
so that was like
Yeah.
a snapshot in time, you know.
Yeah.
This is a local manager, Carmine Barana Jr., who just
Okay.
never went on to do anything. This is Lightning Kid. Let me sit back here. Lightning Kid, right? John Waltman.
There he
He
is.
was best friends with Jerry Lynn, right? Best friends with Jerry Lynn. They were going to make it big. They did, but they beat the crap out of each other and had a feud everywhere around the Midwest, right?
Yeah.
And at one of the matches, it was you know, I shave your head match, right? So he shaved Jerry Lynn's head, and they saved the hair and offered a little bit of hair in baggies for $5 a pop with certificates of authenticity.
Wow.
And so on an interview, I heard Sean say, yeah, no, they made $300 or $400 from selling that hair, you know.
Wow.
Oh, that was, you know, ingenuity, you know.
Yeah. Good marketing. Yeah.
So this is an action shot of Hulk Hogan getting poked in the eyes by Big Boss Man at the Mall of America.
Yeah.
Jeff Warner on Randy Gusto, I think. Stan Kowalski, everyone just absolutely loves him, or any picture, anytime anyone talks about Stan. It was a little bit before my time. So
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah.
this is a good shot of Road Warrior Hawk and Eddie Sharkey, and I think that's Ole Anderson.
That is Ole Anderson. Yeah.
He didn't come to town very often, but his whole, you know, he was a Southern boy, but his whole gimmick was he was
Minnesota.
a Minnesotan. You know?
Yeah.
So the next shot, this is Kathy Osmondson. She would shoot with me, and she would send her pictures to Japanese wrestling magazines.
Okay.
And they would publish hers, and she would just send off her undeveloped film. And for years she gave away. And so yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention her.
Yeah.
This is Wayne Bloom, who went on to be one of the Beverleys, and I don't remember if it was Blake or the other one.
Yeah.
I never really liked to see him because he was always drunk. And he would always, you know, when guys are drunk, they think they're more clever than they are. And so he would, you know, try to teach me how to do shots and stuff. And I'm like, you know, just, you know, mind your own business. So this is a great shot of Brad Rangans overseeing Jesse Henning, trying to show him, you know, certain holds and stuff. And this was at Brad's training camp in Hamel, Minnesota. So this was like a very privileged view. And I don't know if Brad ever allowed a photographer in before. Yeah. And so he'd seen me at a couple of shows, and I called him up, and I came out on a Sunday, and Jesse was there, and he was training about 6 or 8 guys. Okay. So and basically it's in like in a separate shed from the house. It's attached to the house. Okay. There was a swimming pool one time. They covered the swimming pool up with concrete and put up a ring, and that's where he trained all these guys for all these years.
Wow.
This is Pat Tanaka. He was one half of the AWA tag teams with Paul Diamond.
Yeah.
This picture, I got to tell you a little story about that. This is Jamie Mangan, the Hater, with the Punisher and Golden Idol. And you look at Jamie Mangan, look at his hand. He's holding his belt upside down. So I gave him a hard time about not knowing which way's up. And he says, listen, you're the photographer. You should have noticed that. And you know what? He was absolutely right. And so anytime I took a picture of anything, I made sure nothing was in the background. You know, there wasn't glare. So it was kind of a lesson learned the hard way. That was a good lesson, you know?
Yeah,
so,
right.
This one is Chavo Guerrero against Conan out in Sturgis.
Okay, wow.
Alundra Blaze, Dump Masamoto out in Sturgis.
Okay, yeah.
Diamond Dallas Page with Mean Gene getting interviewed. This is Paul Orndorff. He was a booker at the time. He was basically planning the matches almost as they were going on.
Yeah.
He was, you know, past his prime too. This is the Spanish announce team, Pedro Morales.
Okay.
And I think his first name is, and that this is Medusa Michelli with my buddies at a radio taping. That's when she was
Yeah.
with the AWA, just started.
Okay.
She's had different,
Yeah.
different characters and different looks.
Yeah.
And I don't, maybe we should just end on this one here,
Okay.
Brian. This is one of my favorite shots of,
Yeah.
again, the most recognized sports figure in the world has his hands around my throat. That I just never thought that would happen, you know.
That's awesome.
So,
That's great. No, I love it. Love it. That's great. No, a lot of pictures, a lot of good stuff, a lot of interesting perspectives on those shots. And let me ask you this before we, what was probably one of your favorite events you went to take pictures and interact with wrestlers? Is there a certain event for you that it just sticks out in your mind that was awesome?
well, yeah, as far as the awesome, well, there's about 3 or 4, but the one was probably that they called it Hog Wild in 1996 for WCW.
Yeah.
And it was basically my buddy and I drove all night from Minneapolis, like at 10 p.m. As we were getting there, a storm came in and pretty much demolished their ring and their rigging and their lights. And so we got there at 7 a.m. the next morning, and they had to reset everything up. And then there was a closed press conference with Hulk Hogan announcing the NWO stuff that I got a press credential to. Hulk Hogan's and my birthday is the same day.
Oh, wow.
Again, I had too much sun, not enough food, not enough sleep, not enough water. I just saw all these guys, that I had watched growing up, and I was like in there, and I had press credentials. So that was really quite cool.
Cool.
The NWA shows that came to town with the Road Warrior Hawk and Terry Funk, and the other one on Brooklyn Park, that was pretty cool too.
Yeah.
But again, just seeing guys like Jimmy Snuka, I'd see him on TV, and the next thing I know, they're like 10 feet away.
Yeah.
So yeah, to answer your question, that Hog Wild in Sturgis was awesome. Pretty cool, because when we got back, my friend and I, we looked at these photos like, can you believe that just happened?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. All right, one more question, and then what are you doing now? You said you were working on your dissertation. Kind of talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I basically, for a job, I work security. So I'm a security officer. I've done that for about 20 years now. And basically that's allowed me to go to school. So I went on to get a master's in mass communications. And then right now I'm working on my doctorate of education leadership. And that degree is going to be called the EDD. It's similar to a PhD, but it's for practitioners and for people that want to teach adult working professionals. Yeah. And my dissertation is on medical and science, continuing medical education. So I'm going to be interviewing doctors. Yeah. And I want to know why they take certain choices for their continuing medical education and why they don't choose certain others. Okay. And so I'm in a process now. I'll be doing something similar where I'm going to be interviewing about 10 to 12 doctors for my dissertation. And then I have to transcribe those interviews and kind of extract common themes and values and morals from that. And so I've already completed the 3 chapters of that. And in the program, I completed the comprehensive exam phase and the 18 courses. So that was, 4 years worth of classes. And I don't know if there's such a thing as post-traumatic stress, but I'm sure I had some sort of version of that, Yeah,
I bet you did.
And so, so that's kind of the stage I'm at now. So something like this is kind of fun for me, where I can talk about something fun rather than just thinking about, school. Yeah. But so that's what I'm doing. I'm working on my doctorate of education leadership.
Well, good for you, and good luck with all that. And Mark, I want to thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I got a good insight on the photography and those pictures. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mark A. Peterson, sir, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. It was fun.
Yeah, it was. And folks, if you're watching, thank you. If you're listening, thank you. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And we'll talk to you soon.